Okay.
Sophomore jinx, maybe in Washington with Jayden Daniels being banged up. We'll talk about that and more here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of The Barbershop, which is one of two shows here on the Locked On NFL Network, where we talk to local experts and keep our finger on the pulse of each and every team from around the league and use clips and also guests. Today, my reoccurring guest is also my man, Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers. He's going to sit here and help us navigate through some of the biggest stories going on around the National Football League right now today, which is Thursday. So that means it is Crossover Thursday, sponsored by Prize Picks across our network. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 in blind ups after you play your first $5 lineup. Hello and shout out to the everydayers. We're glad to have you here. And reminding you, wherever you get your podcast, that's where you need to tap in, whether you watch or listen. And if you want to read, check out the newsletters at lockedonpodcast.com/newsletters. Here's where CC and I are going to go. There's a Thursday night game, and it is going to be a massacre, I believe, between the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. We'll preview that. Right in the middle of that, the Lions D got them back on track against their old offensive coordinator. We'll check in on their former defensive coordinator also in the middle of the show. But at the top, we're going to talk about this sophomore jinx, man. And I was hoping it didn't happen. You know, people were saying that, you know, maybe it would be sophomore slump. I think Jayden Daniels is too good to go into a slump. But injuries happen, and he ain't the biggest person in the world. He's a little frail, and they're already taking a toll on him, CC.
Yeah, you know, sophomore slumps happen, but this isn't a slump. This is just, hey, you know what? He's a mobile quarterback. Sometimes you're going to take hits. Sometimes you got to deal with him. He's questionable right now. They're still going to kind of wait until Friday, I think, before they give a real word on what they expect to see. But I would pause before we put it too far into a full jinx mode for Jayden Daniels. This could be a thing where, you know, he plays Sunday, he rips off some big plays, and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh man, he's still Jayden Daniels. So I think we got to wait and see how it goes. But, you know, this is part of the risk of when you're a quarterback that likes to move, a quarterback that, you know, that has to protect himself a lot more. And, you know, it's part of the natural risk. And, you know, there's guys that are pocket quarterbacks that get hurt a lot, you know, like look at Joe Burrow out for a third year. So, you know, let's wait and see what happens with Jayden Daniels in this situation.
Yeah, let's listen to the guys from the DC Squad show, and then I'll tell you something that David Harrison told me that kind of made sense about Jayden Daniels in just a second, as soon as we hear from these guys.
But yeah, you know, I would rather see this team be cautious. I just would. I would rather see, there's a reason why you have Marcus Mariota. There's a reason why you have a veteran and somebody that, listen, won a Heisman Trophy that we know can fill in this offense. You have it so you don't have to force a quarterback out there and worry about long-term issues, worry about something that could progress, something that could get worse. It's not needed. And quite frankly, nobody in that building should care about the conversation of aggression. Like, you and I can talk about it. Anybody else, David can talk. We all can talk about it. They can't let that influence the decisions that they're going to make, because in reality, even if this team wins 9 or 10 games this year and it's like, oh God, well, they weren't as good as they were last year, Anthony. Well, okay. The schedule is tougher and they're dealing with all kinds of things that are maybe different than last year. The focus has to also still be long-term, and it's tough. Because, like, coming into this year, had they won 6 games or 7 games last year, the thought would still be about rebuilding. They had this win now mentality because of the 12 wins last year and the Super Bowl expectations, whether you want to look at odds or not. And then there's also the fact that this team really was still looking to rebuild this thing. So it's like they're kind of got their feet in 2 rooms at the same time. And it's a thing to balance. This is where the balance now needs to be long-term and not short-term.
We're having a conversation about Washington, and this is why I'd rather call it a jinx than a slump, because everyone may have put them a little bit further along than they were, but when you really look at it, if you pull Jayden Daniels out of that situation, unlike a situation we're going to talk about in just a second, they're old. their roster is old and they're kind of scattered, right? So it's like he is the one thing, probably more so than any other team that I can think of right offhand. He's the one dude that if you remove him, their total identity changes. You mentioned Cincinnati. Jake Browning has done this before. He's won some games, and they actually were losing when Burrow left, and then they won that game. I don't know if that can happen with Jayden Daniels. And what it would do, the jinx is it makes you think that they're better than they are, sort of like Houston. And that's the second-year jinx that may befuddle this team, because when you really break it down, they are old and young, and they don't have a lot of balance in their roster.
Yeah, I do think that sometimes, you look at a roster and you see how much one guy sort of props things up. Jayden Daniels could be in that conversation. Heck, you go look at, what they were without him, what they were with him. It's an immediate stark contrast. I did not expect him to pick them up that quickly as he did in his rookie season. So yeah, you're not wrong, man. Like this is a team that I think people kind of get that, like, without Jayden Daniels, he's the straw that stirs the drink, man. He puts things together. He's the key ingredient. But that's why I think the guy's right. Like you gotta protect him. You can't risk him just for a game that you think this is the Raiders. Like, you got a chance to just do your thing. If you lose to the Raiders, oh well, it's a non-conference game. You get to see, you get to evaluate him, make sure he comes back healthy the next week, and you can keep moving forward. I see the Commanders as a legit threat in the NFC East to the Philadelphia Eagles to win the division this year. So don't spoil the long term for the short term. Make sure he's healthy. Make sure he can protect himself. If he is, sure, play him. But there's no need to rush Jayden Daniels into a situation that would further endanger or worsen an injury that you do deem serious.
Now, if anybody needs an example of the total flip side of what we're talking about here in terms of team building, we're going to go to Minnesota right now and hear Luke Braun talk about their young quarterback and J.J. McCarthy.
We'll have to be a little patient for a month now while he comes off of this high ankle sprain. And then when he's back, we have to be a little bit patient still with the operation of everything. Maybe a month off to gather his thoughts, collect, reflect on what went wrong in that Atlanta game will be good. It's a bad taste in his mouth for a while. He's probably going to come out super fired up. But just to kind of have that moment to sort of take stock and process might be good for him.
So here's the total flip of that. You have a team in Minnesota that, if you don't look at the quarterback position, they are put together really, really well. Offensive line, defensive line, structure, coaching on both sides of the ball, weapons, all of that. And he just has to play okay. And now he's banged up. So it's the total flip side. Like, you take him away, you don't think they're going to be missing a whole bunch, and they could still compete. They might not win, but this is the total opposite. And now Minnesota, it's almost like, are you patient, or do you try to trade for a veteran or somebody to help you at least make it to the playoffs, because your team is built to actually do that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a Vikings team that I think is very well built and just needs a quarterback to settle into the position. So I do think it's something that you consider if you think that he's going to be out very, longer term. But you need to make sure this is a year where, like, they have an O-line, they have a D-line, they have a secondary, they have a wide receiver room, they have playmakers. They've got a good roster, and you don't want to spoil that. And they're hoping that J.J. McCarthy doesn't in the long term, and that he is a good playmaker. He distributes the football, and he's their quarterback answer. If he is, it sets them up for a Super Bowl window. If it's not, they're going to be looking for some more answers soon. So, he's another guy. Let's wait and see how he does, injury wise, week to week. When he returns, I don't think there's any rush for it. But I agree with your assessment. I think that the Vikings are built more like a team that can handle something like that in the interim and bounce back from it if he just misses like a couple weeks.
No doubt about it. Speaking of bouncing back, the fighting kneecap biters in Detroit, Dan Campbell, they did some bouncing back in a big way against one of their old proteges. We'll talk about that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. All right, man. Today's show is sponsored by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, and more IIHS Top Safety Pick awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breath work, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how we craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa Valley leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but everyday drives, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail because you make every move count. Impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, my man Chris Carter is here with us, talking about teams that had to get back on track, that we had a lot of expectations for. The Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions did that. They welcomed in the Chicago Bears and their former offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson. They locked the gate, they beat them down, and then they unlocked the gate and sent them on their way. And that's exactly what happened. Here's my man Matt Derry talking about Detroit and their comeuppance in week 2.
But the Lions defenders took it personally. I think they think Ben Johnson had one foot out the door before the season ended last year. They wanted to put out a statement yesterday. Not only did they do that, they punked him with the stumble bum celebration after an interception. Kirby Joseph's throwing the ball to Brian Branch after stumbling. And they did that right in front of the Bears bench. You know, Ben Johnson saw that. Those guys were out for blood. And a motivated team, and a team that knew they needed a win, hadn't lost 2 games in a row since 2022. That was a good win. Yeah.
I'm going to give Ben a little mulligan on something now. Ben had like 28 dudes on the IR last year. It might have been 38. I mean, the defense was bagged up, man. But in the NFL, Chris, you've done this. You're a credentialed member of the media. You've been around this thing. It doesn't take much for these dudes to get a little bit of chip on their shoulder, and they will let you know about whatever's on their mind if you're a former player or coach on that team.
Look, Mike Tomlin last year, we learned from Russell Wilson. He does a thing where he gives out a petty game ball sometimes if that's on the line. So, we didn't get to know if there was a petty game ball for Aaron Rodgers' win over the Jets, but we probably think there probably was. But I think that there's always that extra motivation sometimes that you get things, and it's part of those things that you kind of do for yourself to fire yourselves up. Like the Patriots used to say, everyone hates us, or everyone says that no, we're not going to make it every year. They would say that no one believes in the New England Patriots, and I'm like, but everyone picked you guys to be in the Super Bowl. What are we talking about? Sometimes you just do stuff like that, just mentally fire yourself up as you go in for your workouts in the morning, and then you'll keep doing it all year long. And if you build off of it, you build off of it. But I think some of this stuff is just extra firing up for fun. But sometimes, especially when you're division rivals and you're a coach in that situation, that is something that players might hold on to.
I remember Kelsey was in the Super Bowl after they won, talking about everybody doubted us. Literally nobody bet with the other team. They all thought y'all were
the Chiefs do the same thing.
Yeah, it's like everybody always does that crap. Speaking of those defensive players for the Jets, they had a different defensive coordinator last year. His name's Aaron Glenn. He is now in New York. And if you ask me, I think he's doing a good job. He had a tough loss last week against a really, really good team in Buffalo. Listen to what John Bushko says already after week 2. Just the fact that he even mentioned something like this drove me crazy.
We're going to talk about one of the most important parts and one of the most important questions Glenn will have to answer if he's going to turn things around. That's finding an identity for this football team, because the Jets' identity was shaken to its core on Sunday against Buffalo. I think it's way too early to say, based on one bad game, that Glenn doesn't have what it takes. We can evaluate the game to game. That game was terrible. Glenn deserves criticism from start to finish in that game. That's different from saying definitively Glenn's not the man for the job.
How can we even get to that point after 2 games, especially after he played Pittsburgh tough in week 1? In week 2, you know what? You can talk about who you want to be all you want, but when you face a team that they face in Buffalo, maybe it's just like saying, okay, wanting to be that ain't enough. That's a really, really good team. You want to be a good team that's physical. They are a good team that's physical, but they can't be talking about firing anybody right now.
No, I listen. I think that there's a long way to go for the Jets. Like they're gonna figure things out. And like, look, like sure they lost a bad one to the Bills, but they were right up with the Steelers. If Chris Boswell misses a 60-yard field goal, is Aaron Glenn all of a sudden, like it doesn't change that. I think that there's always the the hyperbole when we get into this kind of stuff. We got to talk about hot seats and everyone wants to jump on things. I think the Jets we're a team that always were going to take time. I think people forget, despite, the 32 points that Justin Fields put up in week 1, there's a lot of people that aren't exactly believing that he's the future for the Jets, that he's a stopgap quarterback, just a for now guy that they're going to probably lead to, like a lot of people, when I do my mock draft simulators for what the NFL teams might do next year, there's a lot of simulators. There's a lot of people that have the Jets picking a quarterback in the top 10. So, I think that this is let's not make too much of this right now. This is a year where Aaron Glenn's going to figure out who the Jets are, what strengths can they carry with them moving forward, who can he rely on as team leaders, and how does he build that locker room out. So I wouldn't react too harshly in either direction for the Jets right now.
No doubt about it. Speaking of the team that beat them in their division, and everybody keeps talking about the AFC South. Yeah, we don't have a dominant team, but I would put the bottom 3 teams in the AFC South against the bottom 3 teams in the AFC East. And that's where we're going, because there's a matchup tonight for Thursday Night Football that I think is going to be an absolute massacre. We will discuss that, and I'm going to pick Chris's brain on what's going on in the AFC North. I'm asking about them Steelers and giving up 30 points 2 weeks in a row. We'll do that and more, the third and final segment here, Locked On NFL. It's all about 5-Hour Energy, man. Can you believe caffeine just got a flavor upgrade? 5-Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors, each 2-ounce shot packs. The caffeine of a premium 12-ounce coffee. Plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar, 0 crashes. What I love most is how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot, and you can take it anywhere and get that boost when you need it. I'm telling you, man, you think doing this, following sports is a dream, but you got to be up and follow the news cycle a lot, and sometimes you get sleepy and you need that energy. And I'm going to tell you right now, 5-Hour Energy helps me. Enough with those boring flavors. Flavorless caffeine doesn't work. It's time to get your caffeine or flavor upgrade with 5-Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love, or be bold and try something new in store or online at www.5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. Today's show is also, as I told you at the very top, sponsored and brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off and get you some Skrilla. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. And I'll tell you what, if you go to Prize Picks, go to Brian Thomas Jr., who has not caught a bunch of balls for yards in the first 2 games. Trust me, the Jaguars are going to get him involved, so you go more on his yard total. Remember, I told you that. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 play. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. All right, CC, let's run it down. Tonight's game between the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. Not a lot of intrigue, but this is the NFL, man. Just as soon as you don't expect it, one of these teams will sneak up jump the boogie, and they'll beat somebody, right? But Buffalo's riding high right now. Listen to my man Joe Marino talk about the dominant win.
The Buffalo Bills' maturity shined in their blowout win over the New York Jets, where it simply came down to this. The Buffalo Bills are a Super Bowl contender, and the Jets are in year 1 of a new regime. The Buffalo Bills were able to blow out the Jets, and Josh Allen didn't score a touchdown. It was just about the Jets beating themselves, the Bills controlling the game with their rushing offense. James Cook adds 2 rushing touchdowns and really had an electric game, and the Bills' defense also bounces back in a big way after plenty of questions came out of the Ravens game in week 1. But the maturity shines, James Cook shines, and the Bills' defense bounces back in week 2 with their win over the Jets.
My man said the Buffalo Bills are a contender and the Jets are in the first year of their rebuild. The Buffalo Bills are a contender and the Miami Dolphins are likely in the last year of McDaniel being their head coach. I expect them to beat the crap out of the Miami Dolphins tonight.
Yeah, I don't see much. Also, let me just say something here, Tony. You ain't slick because you said up jumps the boogie and then threw the Joe Marino, thinking I was going to forget that you said that, trying to make Missy Elliott and Timberland references up in here. Get out of here, trying to cover up his tracks. He's like, Chris is going to forget it, so I throw this clip in here.
Yeah. There you go. You got
it. But anyways, I look at this and I do survivor leagues, right? Like I think that every week you try to pick the team that you think isn't going to lose, and then you get so many strikes, and you can only pick a team once throughout the year, and so each time you look for someone. But each week you look for that. You look for the one that's like, okay, this is the team that I think is going to have a few more survivor wins. So I'm not going to pick them this week. I'm gonna pick someone else that I think has a really good matchup where they can win. So, but I don't trust them moving forward. And this is one of those easy ones. Like you look at it, almost everybody's picking the Bills this week because they're just like, there's no chance that they lose this game to the Dolphins. And look, I get it. It's but I'm like, man, they're gonna play each other again at some point. So I'm gonna save that. I'm gonna save this one. I got a few other games that I can put in my survivor, but it's like too obvious at this point. And look, the Bills are playing really well. The Dolphins are not. I had Brian Dable as my first coach getting fired this year, but Mike McDaniel's looking like he might beat him out the door.
Yeah, man, they're finger pointing. They're finger pointing, and Tua is still explaining stuff. And in fact, this is like year 5 of Tua, right? It's kind of like this with Trevor, but at least here locally, we don't feel this way about Trevor. We just want Trevor to do well. We want other people to see what we see in him and the reasons why he with the drops and all of that stuff is why he doesn't get credit. I want you to hear what Kyle Krabs is describing with Tua Tagovailoa. I think this is year 4 for him. This doesn't sound like something you need to be saying about your quarterback. Listen
to the game. I said Tua Tagovailoa is a better quarterback than what he showed in week 1 against the Colts. You can say whatever you want about the ceilings and the floors and the finances and the durability and the arm strength. You could all that. You could say whatever you want. He's a better quarterback than what he showed in week 1. And he played to that in week 2. Thought he played a sturdy game with the exception of 2 things.
One of them to me was the press conference. The press conference afterwards, I don't like when dudes overly explain stuff. It's like, bro, come on, man. And then it's almost like the finger pointing, and it's like the coaches point at the players are pointing at the coaches. People are saying we weren't lined up. We didn't know what we were supposed to be doing. And then you're getting whooped on the field by an upstart Patriots team. It just feels to me like, yeah, this is what over looks like.
Yeah. When you lose, you want to close ranks. You want to be like, hey, even if there are obvious times where you're like, that guy over there messed up so bad. When you lose, you want to be like, hey, we have to win as a team. This is on me. I got to do something. But when you're not, and like that gets harder to do as the season goes along. When you lose like your 4th or 5th game of the season, or like when your playoffs are in jeopardy, or you like there's that, then the pressure starts to mount, and then like there might be some frustration that boils up. But when you're in week 2, and there's like the finger pointing around, that can be rough. And so I do think Tua is in a rough situation. I mean, and look, Tua was calling out his superstar wide receiver for things he said before the training camp even opened, right? So I think it's going to be – I think the Dolphins are in a really rough spot already. I don't know how they necessarily recover from this. I think it's going to be interesting to see if they don't bounce back. How does Miami handle it? Do they turn this into a fire sale where they have several stars and they like, you know what? We have to do some rebuilding already. We're gonna just sell off a lot of our star players for draft picks and use that to start the rebuild now. Because right now I did not have them being a playoff team going into the year, and right now they're looking like they're probably not going to be a playoff team.
Yeah, I was thinking about Tyreek Hill. Like, okay, who could make a move for Tyreek Hill? And then I thought, Pittsburgh, maybe the Steelers. I don't know how much sense it makes with their salary structure and with DK Metcalf making all the money. But I'm not really concerned about Pittsburgh's offense as much as I'm concerned about their defense a little bit, because they were one of those teams that I told people don't keep on them. They're like the third or fourth team, in my opinion, that really has a shot. Kansas City, Baltimore, Buffalo, and I was just thinking, okay, the Chargers are almost there. This is before the year. I think the Chargers are way beyond what I thought. But I was just sitting there thinking Pittsburgh could be that sleeper team with competent quarterback play and now more additions on their defense. It just hasn't looked the way I thought it was going to look the first couple of weeks. And you got your finger on the pulse of the team. Let us know what we're missing here.
I think the thing with the defense is that they're definitely hurt up right now, and it's not an excuse for them. They're saying we got to get the job done, but they've been putting themselves in positions to win certain matchups, and they haven't been winning them. Keanu Benton, a guy who was a good nose tackle for them last year, hasn't been a good nose tackle this year. He's been getting pushed off the ball. He's been double teamed and getting his linebackers in a lot of trouble, and it's allowed the run game to flourish against the Steelers, which has not been a thing, in their best years. And last year they ended the year rough. With that playoff loss to the Ravens, and everyone remembers the losses to like the Eagles and the Chiefs, but they were a top 10 defense last year, and right now they're like a bottom 5 defense when it comes to points and yards. So they need to snap out of it. And you look at the plays, people are like, "Oh, it's the play calls." There, you guys know, like they're saying, "Hey, we expect to win in this situation. We expect to win in that situation," and they've been losing some key matchups and some key points. And I do think this is the thing that can correct itself if they have the talent to do it. But it has to actually happen, because if this happens for a third straight week, it's just going to continue the questions of, is this defense actually good? But I think one thing that's happening with this Steelers defense that hasn't happened for the past few years is they are being a lot more aggressive. What I mean by that is Terrell Austin, who's the Steelers defensive coordinator, when he took over, he was the DB's coach for the team. A few years ago, this is his 4th season as defensive coordinator. The 5 years before that, before he took over as defensive coordinator, the Steelers led the NFL in sacks. They sent heat no matter where they came from, because the guy before him was the Steelers linebackers coach who turned into a defensive coordinator. That was Keith Butler. He was all about bringing heat. He was all about bringing pressure. Terrell Austin, a DB's coach, is about, hey, you know what? We're going to try to pressure you, but we're going to do a lot more complex things in coverage. We're going to try to trick you into things. And that's where Minkah Fitzpatrick, was earning all pros and doing things there. That there was a good mix there that they had going on. And I think what you're seeing right now is they're trying to be more aggressive with the blitz and the coverage. And to do that, you're going to leave some holes. You're going to have mistakes. You're going to have places where guys are put in some tough spots to win, but you're going to need to experiment with that and then have these guys adjust to it and trust that these veterans that you brought in, like Jalen Ramsey, guys that you pay like Patrick Queen, you're expecting them to Darius Slay, the guys that be like, hey, you're going to be able to figure these things out. And once we tighten these things up, we're going to turn from a defense that's getting gashed for the most explosive plays in the NFL through 2 weeks into a more aggressive defense that limits those explosive plays, but also makes your own explosive plays. And I think that's what the Steelers are gearing up right now, is they are trying to set themselves up for a chance to be this aggressive defense that accounts for all the basics, but also brings so much more with it. And it's a little different this year for multiple reasons. A, because they got new pieces. They basically got a new secondary in there. But B, they're also missing several key pieces. Joey Porter Jr., who was supposed to be the number 2 corner behind Ramsey. Deshaun Elliott, the team starting strong safety, who was got a decent raise and was supposed to be a big part of what they did both in coverage and against the run. Derek Harmon, their first-round pick defensive tackle, though he returned to practice this past Wednesday. I don't expect him to play just yet this week, but he's been a big piece. His backup, Isaiah Loudermilk, just ended up going missing. Alex Highsmith is now out for this game, and they've had other key injuries. So this defense has been getting blow after blow, while also trying to be this aggressive unit that's going to be so detailed in so many different spots and so aggressive. I think they're just hitting some early bumps in the road, but that's no excuse. They still have to find answers. We'll see if they do this Sunday in Foxborough against the Patriots.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see Derek Harmon, because all throughout the draft when we were building up to it, you and I kept mentioning Derek Harmon, Kenneth Grant. They're either going to get the nose tackle or they're going to get the big defensive lineman. that reminds everybody of Stephon Tuitt, whose career was shortened. So the other thing, I remember a conversation, I think I had it with you or either Matt. I said, if they don't get Kenneth Grant, they get Jamari Caldwell. Oh my God, have you seen that kid play for the Chargers? Jamari Caldwell is the real deal at nose tackle. But sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. And then if you don't get them, you got to play against them. You don't got to play against Locked On NFL, though, because you can catch us twice a day. You can catch either or both Tyler Rowland and I. The madman will wake you up in the morning with a double shot of espresso, and we slide through here just like we just did in the barbershop, and we take you for a cool look around the National Football League with the help of local experts. Like my man Chris Carter that you can find on Locked On Steelers. Make sure you check him out also if you're reading in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We will see you next time here on Locked On NFL. You guys take care. We appreciate you spending 30 minutes with us. Thank you very much.